And they continue on this path, or that person is being bullied for years, that later eventually in adult life these things can start to creep up in obviously negative ways.
Welcome to Mama's Playground. This is Darlene.
And this is Monica.
And in this podcast, we talk about parenting and all things life. And we're actually, because we're back to school.
Yes, we're starting school.
We're starting school. Some people started, some haven't started yet. But we are going to be touching a very, very important topic, especially around this time that the kids are going to be back in school.
Yes, which is bullying.
Bullying.
Oh, man. So we're a mama's playground. We want to keep things light, fun, fun. But sometimes we have to touch these type of topics, right?
Yep.
And especially now that we both have kids, and I'm sure, we've had our own experiences maybe with this topic. And then the fact that we've got a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old that are just starting.
And we've talked kind of about this in other episodes where these kids are in these formative years, and everything is so important, what they hear, what they imitate, the people that they surround themselves with. And so bullying, I mean, it's a strong word, it's a strong concept, but it happens. And so today we're going to be talking about that. That bully was actually a word that was a negative. Like back in the 16th century, it meant like lover.
Really?
Yeah.
So I wonder where they got like bully.
Yeah, and I guess two of the it was synonym for lover, but two of those lovers did some bad stuff, and and that's why then it became into what it is now, something negative. But yeah, by the turn of the century, it became a person who evoked fear among their peers, and there are two particular stories on that. But today we're not going to go into it.
Can I give my own definition of that, though? Now that you said bullying is like lover. So I want to say people that bully, it's because they have their own insecurities. And God only knows if they like you, or there's something about you that they envy and all that, or there's just some potential that they see in you, or you stand out because you may be different or so on. And that's why they're probably like secretly in love with you or something.
Yeah, that's why I remember I said, the kid is bothering you? Okay, but that means that he likes you.
Oh my God.
But we also have to identify those moments that are not like that. Have you had any experience in the past or with the kids with bullying?
Not with my kids. My kids are too small, but I've had my share of experiences back like in high school, but stupid random stuff that I still remember. But we'll get into that because I know you want to bring in a special guest. So when she tells her story, maybe I'll get into mine.
Yes. So my experience, I didn't have any issues in school, but in my school, it did happen. The school where I went to back home in Puerto Rico, it did happen. It didn't happen to me. We're talking about a time where the name, the concept, like nobody would say the word bullying. Like, we didn't know as kids, like, what was going on. We thought it was funny. The teachers didn't do anything about it. So it's not like now that we know what it means. We know all the negative effects it can have in
somebody's life,
Yeah.
Even through adulthood, you see people still with traumas of things that maybe that they were called or something that happened to them that marked them, in high school or in middle school or so on.
Yeah. So these are things that affect people, and now that there's a name, and I remember when I first recognized what it is, and I couldn't stop thinking about a couple of girls in my school and boys that I would see them being bullied. I just didn't know the name, but there's one person in particular, and her name is Lynn, that I could never I couldn't stop thinking about her and being like, oh my God, this used to happen to her, and nobody did anything. So 10 years ago, more or less, I reached out to her, and we've been in contact, and I am so happy because today we're going to have her here talking about those years and also about what she's doing now and how she took something negative and turned it into something positive and helping other people.
I am excited to meet this Lynn. Never met her before, but I've heard such good things about her.
Yes, so here we go. Let's welcome Lynn to Mama's Playground. Hey, welcome, Lynn. How are you? It's been what, like 30 years?
Yes, it has since mid-90s.
Oh, I should have said like, oh, it was 10 years ago, but no.
No, nobody's gonna believe it.
Thank you so much for taking time. I know you're super busy. Thanks for being here and taking this time to talk to us about a very, very important topic. This is Monica.
Yes. Hi, Lynn. Nice to meet you. Super excited to have you on.
Nice to meet you too.
So what have you been up to in these past 30 years?
Well, a lot, but what I'm doing now is I'm a licensed mental health counselor and an educational psychologist for the state of Florida. I have a private practice where I specialize in treating people with complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder.
Oh, wow. That makes my job like seem so worth it.
Nice.
That's my job. But a lot of people don't treat people with BPD because it is complex and nuanced.
Can you say that again?
Borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
Short BPD. Sorry, I'm so used to the letters that I don't say them.
And so how long have you been doing it for?
I started as a therapist in 2010. I started working with children in chrysalis health, which was really, I got training there for trauma because we were working with DCF cases and a lot of sexual abuse. And so I didn't start out wanting to work with borderline personality disorder. I just had a calling for trauma. After doing that for about 4 years, I went into the addiction world. And once you start working with addicts, because of rehab or outpatient, once you take away their active addictive behaviors, you start seeing the personality disorders and the trauma that was what led to the addiction, at least in my experience. I don't know if that's everybody's experience. And then after that, I just went into private practice. And early on in my career, I started noticing people who had these behavioral patterns and all these issues and suicidal ideations. And I really didn't know at the time because I was such a new therapist. I did not know what this was. And as I worked with them more, I had a heart for them. And I came to realize these were all clients with borderline personality disorder. And these are the people that I was told in my master's, avoid, do not treat them. They're impossible to treat. And I came to realize through training, and because I went and specialized in it and got additional training on top of my master's, no, actually, it's one personality disorder that I believe is completely you don't call it curable. You can send it into recovery. Manageable, yeah. Because there's dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's the one personality disorder I think you can completely come out of. Other personality disorders are difficult, in my experience, to treat because of the issue with wanting to change and acknowledge their behaviors and not blame others. If you do not want to change, you don't want to look inwards, there's nothing that a therapist can do.
Can I ask you a question, Lynn? Because our topic for today is about, we're basically, a lot of schools are back in. Some schools are starting now, school's starting. And the reason why we brought up this topic, it's bullying in schools and the effects that bullying has and all that. And Darlene had mentioned to me, why she wanted to bring you on was that you had your own past experience with bullying.
Yeah, which at that time we didn't have a name for it.
Which exactly, I think back to you were just like, oh, they make fun of, but there was no like, oh, you're bullying this person. I guess in your experience, do you feel? Because you said you had your history with this. Do you feel that when you got into your private practice and you got into what you're doing now, in some shape, way, or form, it helps? I know some people have like disorders, but it helps people that maybe have past or people have traumas from past bullying that maybe can lead up to having some sort of a disorder. I don't know if that makes sense. Like if
there's so much that goes into, especially personality disorders, they're genetic as well as environmental. But a lot of the clients that I have, the part of their trauma can be bullying, because here's the thing, especially if you have complex, because there's PTSD and then there's complex PTSD. The Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM, really only recognizes PTSD. We're starting to begin to recognize complex PTSD, which is that think of yourself as an onion. There's layers upon layers upon layers of trauma. It's not just one event like I went to war, and not to, invalidate that. That's not a horrible experience, but you had that one experience, but your childhood was amazing. But if you had like abuse at the home, and then you got bullied, and then you got into a horrible marriage, these are multiple events that make the PTSD complex. A lot of people that I have, because they body language or whatever was going on with them, maybe they were shy, maybe they were overly extroverted or overly open, or they just acted in a way that was different, quote unquote different, they could have been targeted. So a lot of the people I've treated have had bullying in their past as well.
So you think like... I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you think like kids, for instance, Darlene and I have small kids, ranging from 3 to 5, would you say like with time, if, other kids are, let's say, bullying our kids, or our kids are the bullies, because you just never know nowadays, and they continue on this path, or that person is being bullied for years, that later eventually in adult life, these things can start to creep up in obviously negative ways, even though as parents, we tell our kids, don't listen to that. That's so ridiculous. Like, don't pay attention. You're better. So on. Like, these kids grow into adults and take these things so personal that later it becomes something that they have to, go to a psychologist for later in life. They could be 40,
It creates insecurity.
Well, it's considered what I call an adverse childhood event or experience. Sorry, adverse childhood experience, an ACE. An ACE is nothing more than a traumatic, it's a way to be able to evaluate what can be considered a traumatic event or events. So nowadays, trauma is very, I guess you could say, loosely defined, in the sense that whatever trauma is very subjective based on you. So if you felt powerless, and as a result of that powerlessness, you were harmed, that is a traumatic event. Now, what I consider to be powerless and harmful to me, you might not. So you have siblings that will be in the same household, or maybe they went to the same school and they both got picked on. But one had more resilience, let's say, than the other. They get through it and they brush it off and they go, whatever. I don't care what these people say.
It doesn't affect them as much.
Exactly. And somebody else will be completely broken by the experience.
I think with this particular episode, we wanted to target, obviously, because we're going back to school, bullying obviously exists. We know this. We're seeing more and more kids, teenagers that are becoming suicidal, the cyberbullying. So much going on that we wanted to bring this topic because we're parents, to make awareness to it, which I know people are aware of it, but to bring maybe tactics, things that we can do, whether it's our kid bullying, whether it's our kid being bullied, things that we can do to maybe...
things that we could do at home.
Yeah, to help them get past it. Like, well, how do we talk to our kids? What do we do to create better adults?
Like, for them to acknowledge it and have that trust to come to us and tell us that's happening.
Well, yeah, one is creating that environment where you do feel like the child feels that they can open, they can trust, and that when you hear it, if your first inclination is go, no, it's not that bad, it's trying to hold back on that and validating that for them, it is a bad experience, and saying, well, what can I do to help you? Do you want me to go to the school and talk to your teachers? With trauma, what we call what the average bare layman person would say, oh, it hurts their confidence. We call shame. Shame, like Brene Brown calls it, is the I'm not good enough. Trauma creates that. Especially if it's bullying, I'm not good enough because somehow I didn't fit in enough to be repetitively and intentionally targeted by a person or a group of people, which is what bullying is defined as. And there is physical, there is verbal, workplace bullying, and other places can be sexual. And the difference between when I got bullied and when kids are being bullied now is that I left the school and the bullying could stop. I could rest from it. Kids now are turning suicidal because it's not just in the school. It's that they're targeting them online. They're texting them. They're calling them. Yeah. And so what technology is supposed to help us is now it can turn against kids. And if you have enough shame and enough hopelessness and enough powerlessness that you don't see a way out, and the only way to stop it is to die, that's why people turn suicidal, because a lot of people don't understand suicidal ideations. Even a lot of therapists are very scared when the client comes in and goes, I want to die. Because I handle it so much on a daily basis, I understand that for most people, they probably won't follow through. I mean, you still have to take it seriously, but it's really about somebody saying, I'm in so much pain, I don't see myself being able to live anymore because I don't see any way else out of this pain. And if you can help them find a way out of the pain and give them enough to say, you are enough and other people don't get to define you, and they can truly internalize that, then the suicidality will go down significantly.
How do you feel with your own experience? Like, I don't know if you mind sharing with us, like, what you had gone through. I may just tap into it as well.
And how did you handle it at the moment?
I'm gonna be honest. Mine is. It sounds like it's very typical for most people. So I was neurodivergent, and I still am. And so I was the weird one, and I do things that now I understand why, but back then it was just me being weird. So I got picked on a lot, and yes, I did have a lot of suicidality. Also, sometimes when the rage is so much, you want to hurt others because you want them to stop. I never acted on that, thank God, but I understand why. I'm not justifying, but I can understand why people like Columbine and all that did what they did. They got to the point that they couldn't take it anymore. I wish somebody would have stopped them because, yes, they shouldn't have done what they did. I don't think you can ever justify taking somebody else's life, even if you are upset. But, yeah, it took me a long time to heal. But I had to heal a lot of other trauma that had nothing to do with the bullying to be able to come to accept that the people who hurt me were hurt themselves. Because one of my biggest bullies, I mean, I won't say his name because he's passed since then, but
I know him.
His bullying was obviously externalized pain because he eventually passed away from his own drug addiction. So that's obviously somebody that was in pain and was looking to destroy themselves and probably anybody else they could get their hands on. And so it wasn't about me. It's just at that time I couldn't see it. I couldn't see that him telling me or making me feel not good enough was possibly a projection of his own feelings of not being good enough.
You see, it took you, I mean, you know, like you said, it's been 30 years, right? About 30 years?
Yeah. It took me about I didn't start therapy until, like, seriously doing it until my early 30s. I had to do a lot of years because, you know, there was all this anger and this resentment, and that got in the way of forgiveness. Like, forgiving is very hard, you know, and I think a lot of therapists nowadays don't focus so much on forgiving. It's more about feeling your feelings, getting to the point where you can let it go, because what is there to forgive? The people were being who they were and understanding that, and then letting it go because it was about their battle, their internal battle that spilled out onto you. And so I let it go because holding on to it was doing nothing but hurting me. And I didn't see the point of hurting me anymore.
Wow, Lynn. And let me tell you, I remember I reached out to you 10 years ago, inviting you to come to one of the high school reunions. And that message was so different from the last one when I invited you to be part of the WhatsApp group that one of our classmates started. And reading the two messages back in, I believe it was 2015, you were kind of like, nope, not interested, but let's keep in touch. And then fast forward to last October, 2022, that I told you about the WhatsApp group, you were so open. And that just stuck with me.
Did you think of it for you? Because I can see exactly. I mean, I was telling Darlene this in the car, actually. I was like, you know, she's like, have you ever been bullied? And I was like, I remember being bullied. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't an excessive thing where I went home every day and was like, but I had a point where in my freshman year, and I'll never forget, I had gone to a Catholic school here in South Florida, and I'm, you know, Hispanic by parents. I was born here, and people didn't think I was Hispanic. They thought that I was, American. They're like, you're too white to be Hispanic. You're too this, you're too that. And it was just a constant, bashing every so often by certain people that I remember crying to my mom, like in 9th grade, telling her, I want out of that school, put me in public school. Like, I don't need to go to this school. You want me in this Catholic school that's so holy and blah, blah, blah. But yet look at these people that are there. And it took me a year to convince her for my sophomore year to put me in public school. And when I went to public school, I was like at the first year that I went in, my sophomore year, I remember being like the new girl that everybody was like, oh, so who's your friend? Like, I had a friend that went to that school. She's like, oh, everybody keeps asking about you. And I felt like, I just hit the table. I felt like such a star on my sophomore year, you know? And then obviously it went dying out, but it was like that first year of high school and people being bullies and being mean, because if they were mean then, I think they're worse now, especially with the, like you said, the awareness now that we have with the cyberbullying, with all the stuff online, with the fact of everybody trying to keep up with, let's put it, the Kardashians, let's put it that way. Everybody has like a thing of how everybody should look or what you should do or this and that. And then if you don't fall into that box, you see all these little girls and even boys, just everybody going into like, I'm not good enough. I don't look like this. A facade. It's crazy, and it's caused so much mental distress. I want to say that it's sad that we say, how as parents with toddlers do we go and teach our kids from now to have have a self-confidence, to not worry and let it just slide off like butter. Like somebody tells you something, it's like, I don't care. You know what? I'm me. I'm not weird. I am, I'm smart. How do you instill that? Because you see stories where there's parents that are constantly telling their kids beautiful things. You're this, you're that, but yet the kid at school, their opinion seems to be more important and take over a toll on this kid versus their family or their parents and all that. So it's hard.
Yeah. Well, because think about it, developmentally speaking, it's normal for teenagers to want to fit in because they finally realize the whole social paradigm and everything. Because when we're younger, like we're in elementary, we totally don't get that. It's when we get to middle school that we start getting, wait a minute, there's a hierarchy here, and I don't want to be on the bottom. And so the friends and everything starts becoming all important, because with all three of my kids, when I started seeing them really struggle emotionally, was middle school. It was because so-and-so said this or that, and girls can be, my daughter had it the worst because, well, so far, because my youngest is about to go into middle school, but she had the hardest because these girls are brutal. And it didn't matter how much I told her she was skinny enough and beautiful enough, is you just kind of have to weather it with them, and then obviously get your kid into therapy if you can, and if they want, you don't want to force them, because you can legally force them, but it doesn't work, as well as if they see the need for it and benefit of it. But it's building them until they kind of get through it to the other side, and then you can help heal as best as you can, because there's no perfect. I mean, I'm going to be honest, at this point, theoretically speaking, they're saying that everybody has trauma.
Oh, yeah.
In some form or another. Even if it was the pandemic alone, everybody has trauma. And the way we live in society, and people can differentiate from me, but my point of view is that we really live in a toxic society that pretty much just fuels the whole, let's not talk about our emotions, let's just stuff it all down and just go, 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 go. It's not healthy.
How do you, there's no classes, like I've always said, like I would love at this point, I mean, my kids are small. Like imagine if there was a class that you start your kids in from when they start actually being able to talk and understand things. Let's say 3 years old, because I see it with my 3-year-old. He's so much more advanced now than when he was 1 or 2, that he's understanding things. Like a self-confidence class that a counselor can give, and you put your kid in there and they're building their self-esteem. They're showing them all the good traits that they have. Like I wish there was this thing to build like a better, I guess like a stronger adults or stronger.
Like motivational class. We talked about this
at one point,
even for adults, because adults go through bullying too, that there should be at their workplace some kind of also programs, and also make healthcare in Department of mental health more affordable. Am I sounding like a politician right now?
There's a whole other stuff that you can get into about mental health accessibility and affordability and everything else. But tell you the truth, I think adults and children would benefit from learning about emotional regulation, frustration tolerance, and what is shame and what does it look like and how are you numbing it? Because, I mean, again, I went through a master's program to become a therapist, and nobody told me about shame. It said I was going to run a group. I happened to be going through TED Talk stuff and discovered Brene Brown and went, wait a minute, holy crap, that sounds like most of my clients. And that's when I started down the road of, intentionally learning about shame. But we don't talk about it because, vulnerability, being able to be vulnerable and talk about how we feel, which is, again, a cornerstone. If your child at home feels like they can be vulnerable, they can talk about their emotions, we openly discuss them and don't shame each other about it. Like, oh, yeah, I need to stop crying, then that would help them. Because if I understand that I can discuss this with somebody, maybe I don't feel safe in the school with this bully, but I can say something and I can be safe in other places. It helps to balance it out. Because my son got bullied at elementary in his last year, and I went to the school and talked to the teachers, and yes, they did all that they were supposed to do and did calm down for a little while.
What are they supposed to do, the teachers?
Well, there's zero tolerance. They're supposed to address it with the kids, separate, do everything, counseling, whatever they're supposed to do to make sure that the bully stops the intentional repetitive behavior and encouraging others to engage in it with them. And so, and they talked to me about what they were doing, and they had my son going to a school counselor to kind of just check in and how he was doing. And for a while it helped, but once they, a couple months went by, everything kind of died down, and then the kids started picking on him because my son is heavy set. He is un gordito. I love my gordito. But kids, it's an easy way to pick on somebody.
It's jealousy. It's ignorance. That's bullying. Like, I mean, it's
somebody else's. I always say it's somebody else's insecurity in themselves that causes them to pick on somebody else, because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel like, well, you're less than. So if your son, let's say, is un gordito, maybe I'm very paranoid because I have a huge nose. But you know what? To kind of like decipher and to put like a mask over it, I pick on your son because it makes me feel better about my nose. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. And we do it as adults too.
A projection of sorts, or maybe that kid's being bullied at home.
Correct.
And so they don't feel, because people who feel powerless will try to find ways to feel powerful and in control. And a lot of times they will do that by doing things to other people. Or maybe it's somebody that at home, they're calling them gordito. And so they feel self-conscious, and then they go and project it onto my son. But trying to explain that to a kid is hard. So, And you talked about how you look like una gringa, a white girl. Imagine me looking blue eyes, white skin. I mean, I used to be called, part of what they used to call me, pote de leche.
Okay. Don't worry, I was called Casper. It's okay.
Casper, okay. I think Casper mentioned at some point. So, all I did with my...
Oh, she got cut.
Oh, no.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
You're back.
It's crazy how, these two blanquitas were being picked up for the color.
Is it me? Uh-oh.
You're there.
Hello?
You're there. Yep.
Okay.
I hear you. I see you. We see you.
For a second. Okay. What I do is I just let him know that I love him, that I accept him, that if he is worried about his health, about his weight, that we can do something healthy about it. I let him come in and cry to me. I tell a lot of parents, because a lot of parents, I know they have the best intentions. They'll say, "Oh, don't cry, stop crying. Let's just, talk about happy things or do happy things, or let's."
No.
And I tell the parent, I get that you just hate watching your child cry. I do too. But by telling them don't cry, you're telling them to stuff their emotions and not feel them. And so you need to let them cry it out and just hug them, whatever it is that they need you to do. So they have that safe space, because it helps to balance what's going on over there. So they do get the message that you are good enough. And, hey, those kids, you know what? It's not about you. And these people don't even know you. So why let them define you? Because a lot of people with trauma, because they don't know how to validate themselves, because they didn't learn how to do it growing up, because they didn't live in a household that could teach them, they depend on others to define them. And that is problematic. I tell my clients that have trauma, I'm like, you hate feeling powerless and out of control, but you're giving your power away every day by letting people tell you who you are.
What would you say as a therapist, like, for instance, like as a pointer to parents that may be listening and maybe their child is the bully, or maybe their child has been bullied or is being bullied? What would you say are like pointers? Like, how do we start at home talking to our kids from an early age and putting the stepping stones so that they don't end up feeling so affected if they are told, because it's inevitable that somebody's going to tell you something that you don't like about yourself. It's always there's always somebody that needs to point out something for whatever reason it is. There's always somebody, and then or the person that their kid is the bully. Hopefully they're not a bully themselves, because you end up seeing that some of these parents tend to be a bully, and then they raise bullies that end up being bullies.
Like they think it's funny to make fun of the other kid when you don't know what the other kid is actually feeling.
Yeah, and obviously there's going to be people you cannot control that behavior, but how do you start with people that are, receptive to and don't want that happening in their household and don't want their kid to be that person? Like, how do they, I mean, I guess it's a lot of communication, right? A lot of communication at home. And
at around what age, so sorry to interrupt you, around what age does it start, and when should we start talking to our kids about it?
Well, I say start in elementary, elementary age. Usually it's more common to see it in middle school than in elementary. Mm-hmm. But, if you already start educating them, if it is happening, they can talk to you about it. Or if they're seeing it, they can talk to you about it. And if it's not happening, well, they're already prepared and they already know when it does. Because a lot of times people will tell me about it being middle school and high school. Okay. But I say start talking, I don't know, like a 1 or 2, first or second grader or something along those, and ask them, have you seen it? Have you gone through it? But with the ones that are the bully, the biggest part is the parent capable of introspection, because is that kid bullying because they've observed your behavior, and are you willing to change your behavior to change his or hers?
Basically being conscious of your own behaviors, of things that you may be doing at home that you're not even aware of, because maybe your parents were like that, and you carry those traits.
Yeah.
Or because we live in a world that people are bullying each other. I mean, 2020 alone, people were bullying each other over political stuff, and we haven't really stopped since.
Yeah.
You turn the TV on, and you have also like these talk shows where they're making fun of other people. And I guess, it's all over the place.
It's all over the place. So is it that you're watching something and laughing at it, and the kid thinks that means you approve of it? Like, what's going on in the environment that made this kid behave in that way, that thought that behaving that way towards another person was acceptable? Or is it that something's going on with dad and we haven't talked about it? Maybe we need to talk about it so that he can heal and stop bullying others as a way of dealing with his or her pain. If the child is being bullied, it's really just, like you said, it's validating, but it's normalizing. It's saying, you know what, there's always going to be somebody who has something to say about you, but you're not required to be perfect, because shame, when it grows, people tend to have this tendency that I want to be perfect, because if I'm perfect, then I won't have shame. But it's an impossible dream. Yeah. The more you try to be perfect, the more you're not, the more you just become paralyzed with the fear of failure, and the more you're likely to fail. And so it's telling them, sweetie, it's progress, not perfection, which is what I tell my clients all the time. It's like, oh, I'm still doing this behavior. All right, well, are you doing it, 2% less? Yes, okay, then it's progress, not perfection. And so it's telling the kids, you know what? You think you're un gordito? Okay. You want to lose weight because of your health? Yeah. Okay. You lost a pound. All right. You're good to go. You're good. That's okay. What you're doing is good enough. You are good enough. Your worth. The other thing I tell my clients, and you can tell your kids, is your worth is not in doing and pleasing others. Your worth is just existing. And I bring in God to it. And I don't know if this will apply for everybody. They may use it or not, but God made you the way you were supposed to be. God makes no mistakes. So the way you are is exactly the way you're supposed to be. And somebody else's mortal opinion of you is nothing compared to what God thinks of you. And if he thinks you're perfect, then you already are.
Amen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we could close it there. Like,
amen. No, this show, it's more targeted like for the kids, what to do with them, when to talk to them about bullying, how to have them, have a more communication with us and be able to report it if they also see it, respect others. But just listening to her, that applies to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're raising small little humans right now, that if we instill that in them from little, I think it's kind of like, what's the word? Like, not subliminally, but if we're constantly practicing with them at home to be good human beings, not like bully anybody, and if they see something different, not to point it out, and just let it be, that person's like that because that's the way that they are, they're perfect the way they are. You might not coincide with them, you might not have the same similarities, but that's okay. We can move on and and go from there. I think it starts actually, instead of starting in middle school, starting practicing and talking to them from when they're little and they're grasping and they're starting to talk and all that stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cognitive ability really starts rearing up at the age of 3. That's when you can start therapy. I mean, I'm not saying put your 3-year-old in therapy, but like you can start talking to them. And again, just like people can internalize a negative self-talk based on their parents or whoever talking negative to them, they can also internalize positive self-talk. So if you just repetitively do it, it builds neural pathways that eventually can beat down the pathways that are being created by others. Because like you said, we can't really avoid completely that they're going to go through some hardships because the world out there is a brutal world. But if we do our parts to let them know they're loved for, they're cared, they're good enough, that what other people doesn't matter, because, everybody's going to have an opinion, because like they say, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. But it's knowing that, other people's opinions doesn't have to define you, then it might not completely slide off, but whatever pieces still stick, with time, they can work it off or go to therapy and peel it off and move on.
Yeah. I think we've got some good pointers here. And I think that the main thing just starts with us communicating more with them and being more positive, even when we're not feeling so positive, trying to
listening to them, because sometimes we're like, oh, we'll talk later. I'm busy. I have to answer this email. Honey, I can't talk to you right now. It's just taking the time. This is our priority, like taking the time and listening to what they have to say.
Well, yeah, and asking questions like, what do you feel? What emotions come up for you? And there's like, in Google, there's like different like faces that you can have that show different emotions, so they can point at it when they're very, very little. And what do you notice in your body? Oh, does your tummy hurt because you're anxious, or is your heart going really fast? What is going on? Because if they can learn how to like notice that their body is doing certain things, they can catch their emotions, and then the coping skills that they can learn is easier to implement. Because a lot of people that stuff down their emotions, they don't even notice the emotion until it's at a 10. And asking somebody to breathe through it.
I know. And then they're like 50 years old at that point, and they've gone through so much trauma, so much this, that they've like basically dug under the sand, and it's just too much now to cope with. So I think if we start earlier, it's definitely better.
Very little.
This has been great advice. I feel like we could be talking for hours. You had sent me some links, some references for anybody that wants to get more information.
Well, there's Stopbullying.gov, which is like an American one. And then there is the other one that's, it is in the UK, but it's Anti-Bullying.Alliance.org. And it has a lot of videos. They'll talk to you about the group dynamic of bullying, because usually it's one person with the aid of other people that allow it to happen, because people enable it or ignore it, which enables it. And so it talks about what is bullying, what does it look like, what are the different types of bullying. So it has a lot of good information. So if somebody's like, well, what is bullying? What does this even look like? And how should I be concerned? These websites, amongst many others that are out there, because there's a lot of anti-bullying websites.
So what would be the number one advice that you could give to one of our listeners that could be going through that with a child or even themselves?
Oh, if it's themselves, it's definitely have a good support system that helps you to kind of soundboard like, hey, is this that they're saying about me even true? Now, of course, this have to be healthy people that know you and would help challenge it. It's getting therapy if you need it, if it's starting to become, a thing that's impacting your ability to function. If it's a workplace bullying, is there something you need to report because, sexual harassment or something, going to HR? Or is it that you just need to find another job because there's just no fixing it and it's a very toxic environment? Although, again, easier said than done sometimes for some people. If it's your child, of course you get angry and you want to avenge your child and do everything. I say first sit down, calm yourself down and how you're feeling about your child's going through, and then allow yourself to hear them and allow them to tell you what they need for you to help them, instead of just taking charge and I know what to do and I'm going to do this without listening to them.
Yeah.
We need to listen to them and what they need and give it to them instead of just doing what we feel we need to do.
Yeah.
I love that. I think we should close on that one because I think that's a great advice.
And like everything between home and the schools. Thank you so much. Lynn, where can people call you, find you if they wanted to schedule an appointment?
Oh my God. Right now I'm so full I can't take it.
That's good. You're full.
Yeah, but they can find me on Psychology Today or StuartCounselor.com. Stuart like the city, Stuart, and counselor. But if I can't take them, my partners have availability and they're amazing.
Okay, so we're going to put a link with all what we talked about today, the websites where you can go to if you need help or anybody that you know. And we'll put your information, your personal cell phone, so you're more... No, I'm kidding.
She's like, what? Don't do that.
Thank you.
Good. It's on the website.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
We got to get together.
Thank you.